I handed my contractor a check for $680,000 to renovate my dream home, and 3 weeks later, he vanished without a trace. When I called the police, they said, "Sorry, counselor, this is a civil matter. You'll have to handle it through the courts." But what they didn't know was that I'm not just any lawyer. I'm a criminal defense attorney who knows how to track down people who don't want to be found. When I hired a private detective and we followed the money trail, we discovered that my licensed contractor was actually running a multi-state construction fraud ring that had stolen over $12 million from homeowners. That's when the FBI got involved. Before we dive into this incredible story of contractor fraud and private investigation, if content like this interests you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us bring you more amazing real-life stories like this one. Now let's get into what happened. My name is Jonathan Hayes. I'm 52 years old, and this is the story of how my contractor disappeared with my life savings, how the police refused to help, and how my legal background and a brilliant private detective helped us expose the biggest home renovation scam in 3 states. I'd been a criminal defense attorney in Chicago for 22 years, building a successful practice defending white-collar crime cases. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd later become the victim of exactly the kind of fraud I'd spent my career fighting in court. My wife Sarah and I had finally saved enough to buy our dream home, a 1920s Tudor-style house in Evanston that needed extensive renovation. We'd been planning this project for 5 years, saving every extra dollar to transform this beautiful but neglected property into our forever home. The house needed everything: complete electrical and plumbing updates, kitchen and bathroom renovations, hardwood floor restoration, and structural repairs to the foundation. We estimated the total project at around $650,000, and we had budgeted $680,000 to ensure we could handle any unexpected issues. Finding the right contractor was crucial. We interviewed 8 different companies over 3 months, checking references, verifying licenses, and reviewing insurance certificates. We weren't naive homeowners. As a lawyer, I knew the importance of due diligence. That's how we found Daniel Morrison Construction. Daniel Morrison seemed like the answer to our prayers. His company had been in business for 12 years, had a rating with the Better Business Bureau, and provided references from 6 recent clients who raved about his work. Morrison himself was impressive, articulate, knowledgeable, and professional. He walked through our house with genuine expertise, identifying issues we hadn't noticed and suggesting solutions that would add value to the property. "Mr. Hayes, I can see you and your wife have excellent taste," he said during our initial consultation. "This house has incredible bones. With the right approach, we can make it absolutely spectacular." His detailed proposal was thorough and professional. He provided itemized costs for every aspect of the renovation, included allowances for materials and permits, and offered a realistic timeline of 4 to 5 months for completion. Most importantly, Morrison was properly licensed and insured. I personally verified his contractor's license with the state, confirmed his insurance policies were current, and checked that his business registration was in good standing. His references were stellar. I spoke with Mrs. Patterson, whose kitchen renovation had been completed 6 months earlier. Daniel and his crew were wonderful, she told me. Professional, clean, and they finished exactly on schedule. I'd hire them again in a heartbeat. We signed the contract in March 2023. The total project cost was $675,000, and Morrison requested 30% down to begin work, $202,500. This seemed reasonable and was standard in the industry. Work began on April 3, 2023, and initially everything went smoothly. Morrison's crew arrived on time, were respectful of our temporary living situation, and made visible progress every day. The first 2 weeks were exactly what we'd hoped for. They completed the demolition phase efficiently, updated the electrical, panels, and began the plumbing rough-in work. Morrison provided daily updates and was responsive to our questions and concerns. "We're right on schedule," Morrison told us at the end of week 2. "Next week we'll finish the plumbing and start framing the kitchen addition." That's when he requested this second payment, another $200,000, to cover materials for the next phase of construction. According to our contract, this payment wasn't due until certain milestones were completed. But Morrison explained that his suppliers required payment up front for the specialty materials we'd selected. "It's the marble countertops and custom cabinetry," he explained. "These high-end suppliers require full payment before they'll begin fabrication." As a lawyer, I should have been more skeptical. But the work that had been completed was excellent. Morrison had been completely reliable, and his explanation seemed reasonable for luxury materials. I wrote the check for $200,000 on April 18th. 3 days later, Morrison called with concerning news. "We've run into some unexpected structural issues with the foundation," he said. "Nothing major, but we need to bring in a structural engineer and do some additional reinforcement work." This wasn't entirely surprising in a 100-year-old house, and Morrison's approach seemed professional. He arranged for the structural engineer consultation and provided a detailed estimate for the additional work. "This will add about $80,000 to the project," Morrison explained. "But it's crucial for the long-term integrity of the house." Against my better judgment, I agreed to the additional work and provided another check for $80,000 on April 25th. On Monday, April 28th, Morrison's crew didn't show up for work. I called Morrison's cell phone and got voicemail. I called the company office and got a disconnected number message. By Wednesday, I was seriously concerned. I drove to the business address listed on Morrison's contract and found an empty office space with a "for lease" sign in the window. That's when I realized I might have been scammed. I immediately called the police. Detective Maria Rodriguez took my report but wasn't encouraging. "Mr. Hayes, I understand your frustration, but this appears to be a civil contract dispute," she told me. "You'll need to pursue this through the courts or hire a private attorney to handle the civil litigation." "Detective, this isn't a contract dispute," I argued. "This is theft. The man took my money and disappeared." "But you voluntarily gave him the money based on a signed contract," Rodriguez replied. "That makes it a civil matter, not criminal fraud." This was incredibly frustrating. As a criminal defense attorney, I knew the distinction between civil and criminal matters, but I also knew that what Morrison had done was criminal fraud, not a contract dispute. Since the police wouldn't investigate, I decided to handle this myself. Through my legal contacts, I found Marcus Chun, a private detective who specialized in financial fraud investigations. "Jonathan, what you're describing sounds like organized fraud, not just a contractor who got in over his head," Chun told me during our first meeting. "If this guy is running a scam, he's probably done it before." Chun's plan was methodical and professional. First, we'd trace Morrison's real identity and business history. Then we'd follow the money trail to see where my payments had gone. Finally, we'd look for other victims who might have similar experiences. "In my experience, scammers like this don't just steal from one victim," Chun explained. "They usually have multiple ongoing cons, and they often use similar methods with each victim." Chun's investigation began with basic identity verification. Within 48 hours, he discovered that Daniel Morrison wasn't Morrison's real name. "Your contractor's real name is David Mitchell," Chun reported. "He's been using false identities to run construction scams across 3 states for the past 4 years. The business license I'd verified was legitimate, but it had been obtained using forged documents. The insurance policies were real, but the premiums hadn't been paid and the policies had lapsed months earlier. Most shocking was the discovery that the business address I'd visited was a mail forwarding service, not an actual office. Chun's financial investigation revealed the sophisticated nature of Mitchell's operation. My $482,500 in payments had been deposited into a business account for Morrison Construction, LLC, but had been immediately transferred to accounts in different names. He's laundering the money through multiple shell companies, Chun explained. Your payments went to Morrison Construction, then to Midwest Building Supply, then to Great Lakes Development, and finally to personal accounts belonging to David Mitchell and his associates. Even more disturbing was the discovery that Mitchell was running similar scams simultaneously in Wisconsin and Indiana. Chun found 5 other families who had been victimized in the past 6 months, with total losses exceeding $3.2 million. The Hendersons in Milwaukee had lost $580,000 for a kitchen and basement renovation that was never completed. The Johnsons in Indianapolis had paid $420,000 for a second-story addition that was abandoned after 2 weeks. This isn't just contractor fraud, Chun told me. This is an organized criminal enterprise. Chun also discovered Mitchell's pattern of operation. He would establish a business in a new city using false credentials, complete 1 or 2 small projects successfully to build references, then target wealthy homeowners for large renovation projects. His method was always the same. Request large upfront payments, begin work to establish credibility, then diss with Chun's evidence. I contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. Agent Jennifer Walsh reviewed our documentation and immediately opened a federal investigation. Mr. Hayes, what you've uncovered is exactly the kind of interstate fraud scheme we prosecute, Agent Walsh told me. The fact that Mitchell is operating across state lines makes this a federal matter. The FBI investigation moved quickly once they understood the scope of Mitchell's operation. They discovered that Mitchell and his associates had been running construction fraud schemes for over 6 years, stealing approximately $12 million from homeowners across 5 states. Mitchell wasn't working alone. He had associates who helped establish false business credentials, create fake references, and launder the stolen money through shell companies. The FBI arrested Mitchell at a hotel in Denver, where he was apparently setting up another fraudulent contracting business under a different false identity. When agents searched his hotel room, they found documents for multiple fake identities, business cards for construction companies that didn't exist, and bank account information for dozens of shell companies. Appear. With the money before completing the projects, Mitchell was charged with wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit fraud. His associates received similar charges. The evidence Chun and I had gathered became crucial to the federal prosecution. During the investigation, the FBI identified 23 victims across 5 states who had lost a combined total of $12.3 million to Mitchell's schemes. Mitchell was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His associates received sentences ranging from 5 to 10 years. The federal court ordered Mitchell to pay full restitution to all victims. While he'll never be able to repay the full amount, the FBI was able to recover approximately $4.8 million. From various accounts and assets, I recovered $195,000 of my $482,500 loss, not complete restitution, but significantly more than I would have recovered without the federal investigation. More importantly, the FBI's investigation led to the creation of a federal database for tracking interstate contractor fraud, making it harder for criminals like Mitchell to operate across state lines. The experience taught me valuable lessons about contractor fraud that I now share with other homeowners. Even thorough due diligence isn't foolproof when criminals are sophisticated enough to create false identities and fake business credentials. The most important lesson is that when police dismiss obvious fraud as a civil matter, don't give up. Private investigators and federal agencies have tools and authority that local police often lack. Today, Sarah and I live in our fully renovated dream home. We hired a legitimate contractor who completed the work for slightly less than our original budget. But it took an additional 8 months and the stress of federal prosecution to get there. The house is beautiful, but every time I walk through it, I'm reminded that sometimes you have to become the detective in your own case to get justice. Mitchell stole my money, but he couldn't steal my determination to hold him accountable. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and sometimes justice requires taking matters into your own hands.